I cashed out my IBM 401k and bought my first Ferrari. The concept was, like, let's see if we can get a Ferrari and, have people pay, for ad spots on it. I think I confused entrepreneurialism with business ownership.
Hey, and welcome back to NexChapter, recorded here in the Republic studio. Think of this as the Republic for founders and entrepreneurs, where we share wisdom, we have fun, and we celebrate the journey of an entrepreneur. I'm Raman Sehgal, the author of The Floundering Founder. I'm also the Toronto chapter lead at PEF, and also your host for today's episode. The show is for founders who are scaling businesses and founders who are sold and are figuring out what the heck to do next. In every episode, we try and cover the 3 T's, the trajectory of the business, the transaction and how a deal went down, and also the transition period post-exit as well. Think of it as unfiltered wisdom from post-exit founders. Today's episode, I have an awesome guest called Ray Chang, who I met in person last year in Miami. And Ray is an award-winning travel and owner of Motorsport Lab, and with over 1,000 5-star reviews on TripAdvisor and accolades from DuPont, Registry, Exotic Car Magazine. Ray is the ultimate guide for motorsport enthusiasts, and as an Aston Martin, Ferrari and Lamborghini owner, Ray's passion for motorsport shines through his kind of unique travel adventures. Experience the kind of origins of iconic brands, and while immersing in the local culture, design and cuisine. Enjoy driving exotic cars, visiting Formula One racetracks, touring museums and doing exclusive previews, dining at top restaurants, shopping at boutique stores, and even having an espresso with factory workers. That's what Ray's business is all about. And his personable nature, as you'll see today, is kind of help first attitude and extensive knowledge of local cultures and cuisines make every trip for his clients very unforgettable. So we're going to very excitedly have Ray on today's show. You're going to get a lot from today's episode. I can guarantee that. And if you haven't already, please follow the show wherever you're listening, subscribe, like, and maybe share it with a few other founders and entrepreneurs in your network. So please enjoy today's show. Hey, Ray, welcome to NexChapter podcast. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here and catching up with you again after being in Miami with you.
Yeah, the weather's not as nice as it was. I mean, I think you're in Boston from memory, so and I'm in Toronto, so I suspect we've both got it's a bit chillier now than it was when we were in having cocktails together in Miami.
Oh, I know. I feel like the winter aggressively hit hard and early, which is crazy. And the funny thing is, I was just in Austria a week and a half or so ago. I had an Aston Martin winter ice driving experience.
You actually invited me to this, so this is cool.
Yeah. And so we get all this training, and then I come back to Boston. We had like 20 inches right afterwards. So it was like, I was so excited to have all that snow, to be honest with you. So I was like, this ain't a big deal anymore. So.
And for our listeners and viewers, Ray had a Aston Martin driving experience in Austria, which just looked amazing, which we'll get into today. But before we kick off the interview proper, what are you drinking today? What drink have you brought for us today to share with our viewers and listeners?
Because it was 10 a.m., I have a usual grind around I start with coffee or like espresso, then I do a strawberry matcha latte. But then right now I'm drinking, you can't see it, but I have this whole big thing of kombucha. And so around 10 o'clock.
Why kombucha? What do you find the benefits are?
The probiotics. I actually because I'm doing this interview with you, drinking it, the sting kind of wakes me up. I
thought my conversation would be enough. Well, it's quite similar. I'm drinking some hip hop, which I get shipped from the UK, and they actually have a kombucha I don't know if there's kombucha in this one, but it's ginger and turmeric, which
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like it's going to give me some goodness for our conversation. But at this
Yep.
time in the morning, normally I'd be doing coffee as well. But yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Is there a particular brand that you drink on your kombucha, or you kind of shop around?
I kind of I shop around. I'm not brand specific. For me, I go to Whole Foods and I'm like, what's on sale, and I just kind of buy it. For me, it's like they all taste the same. So unless there's like
Yeah,
some
yeah.
extra benefit, I just don't know. But I do like the weird flavors. That's the thing. So if it's a weird flavor, I'll gravitate towards it because it's just so new for me. And
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
people get really creative. And I know we'll touch upon Maine, but in Maine, there's a lot of kombucheries, and so I hit those up, and they have really
That's
interesting
cool.
flavors, like pine. Like who would have thought
That's
pine would
cool.
be a flavor? But yeah.
My favorite beer in the US actually is from Maine. It's a beer called Allagash White,
Oh
which
yeah.
is scent. And actually, it's funny because he said like flavors. It has quite a citrusy, orangey lemon flavor, like a bit like a European white beer, like a Hogarden. And yeah,
Yeah.
that is a cool place, Portland, Maine. Like
Yeah,
Portland, Maine, and Maine generally.
my neighbor he's a brewer for them, so he would
Wow.
illegally park in my parking spot, like my driveway, when I'm up there, and then he would just leave me a case outside my door.
Oh my god.
He's like, that's how I know he parked at my spot. It's because
This
like
is why you're a good friend. This is why you're a good friend to have, my friend. You've got the Astons. You got the good stuff from Whole Foods. You got the Allagash. You're my type of guy. Well, look. Thanks for being here, and I'm sure our audience has already got a sense of the vibe of the type of guy you are, which is awesome. But you've got such a cool. I mean, when we met, I was fascinated by the industry that you've established your businesses. And so I'd love you to just talk about, the kind of how you got into, because you've had two businesses in the same industry, but obviously we're going to talk about both of them. But like, how did you get into like motorsport and fast cars and Ferraris, and maybe give some context to the first business, which you eventually sold as well?
Yeah, so I'll break up kind of like my business career, so to speak, in kind of the phase of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. That may be the
Sure.
easiest because
Yeah.
those are the pinnacles of it. So pre-pandemic, I ran a $13 million Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, US, ride and drive business. So I had 16 exotic cars, mix of Ferraris, Lambos, and Aston Martins, and five 40-foot gooseneck trailers, five 350
How
dual
do you
wheels.
buy these, by the way? Like, how do you get the capital for these? Like, just because that's like, I don't know, like that's about a couple of $1 million easy, if not more.
Yeah.
Plus
So
the insurance.
yeah, so as a entrepreneur, I wasn't able to like, how do I say? When you go to somebody and tell them what you're gonna do in this type of business, they go, they ain't gonna happen. So you get enough no's, and then you get clever, because I was an IBMer. You're thinking, hey, let's see if I get some sponsorship dollars, and I wasn't that good at selling sponsorship, so to speak. So literally, I did the most, thing. I guess the easiest thing you could do is like I cashed out my IBM 401k and bought my first Ferrari.
Wow, good for you. Good for
Right, it
you.
was the most
And were you
scariest
always
thing.
into cars? Were you always into cars? Was this like because like I love cars and it's a passion of mine, but what you're doing is like supercar level, right?
Yeah, so I lived in North Carolina at that time. So I was an IBMer, right? And you're in North Carolina. North Carolina for me at that point in time was known for like a couple things. And I was living in Raleigh, was basketball, Duke
Yeah.
and UNC, right? And NASCAR, right? Those are the two things. And so NASCAR was always, and obviously football, right? You're in football with NC State stuff. And so I kind of gravitated towards the whole NASCAR racing phenomenon and that whole Southern culture. At the same time, who, as a kid, you always dreamt of having a Ferrari or Lamborghini or an Aston Martin, right? So when I lived down there, I literally got around a lot of motorsports enthusiasts that were in both lenses of like, I
Yep.
had a lot of wealthy friends who had those exotic cars. And then I had also my normal friends that didn't, but they love going to races, and we're all hanging out. Right. And so that's kind of where I guess the seed of racing kind of like kicked in. How I started my business was kind of very interesting. Literally, the concept was, like, let's see if we can get a Ferrari and, have people pay for ad spots on it and driving around Raleigh, North Carolina. That was the whole premise of the initial,
like an F1 car, effectively, like a supercar, but driving around with loads of local advertising on it.
Yeah, or like a NASCAR driving around any street USA
Sure.
and having people pay for an ad spot. Surprisingly, when I pitched the concept to a few local restaurants, like one person bought an ad spot. It was like kind of cool, right? I was like, oh, this is kind of gonna work, but it wasn't scalable enough, right? So it didn't really work out in Raleigh, North Carolina. But at that time, I was an IBMer, and like all IBMers, I realized you can't really keep working at a company if you're too entrepreneurially minded. And so my division of IBM ThinkPad got bought out by Lenovo. And so there was layoffs to be had, and I was affected. And so I moved back to Boston. I said, I still love this whole, sponsoring a Ferrari idea. Let me see if I can make it work in Boston, because, I wasn't a marketer at IBM, and data was like, dude, there's so many impressions. There's so many people.
Yeah.
And so I tested out. I actually was like, I'm going to go test this out. And so I rented a Ferrari from a company in New Jersey, and I threw my dad's sushi business logos on the Ferrari. I drove around, this is April 2010. I drove around Fenway Park because it was opening day against the Yankees. Right. And you lived in Boston, so that vibe.
That is such a vibe.
Yeah. So I drove this Ferrari with my dad's sushi branding like the whole weekend around Fenway. Just kept doing laps around Lansdowne Street. It was like the cops who are directing traffic, like, what is going on, right? And I don't think he's ever seen like guerrilla marketing to this effect. And so, long story short, I got noticed. I got a lot of people in the startup community in Boston saw what I was doing. They thought I was kind of crazy. And they invited me to speak at some of these, local, meetups. And they even invited my dad to come and hang out because my dad was, his sushi brand was there. And so the funny thing is, nobody still wanted to advertise. They were like, we don't want to advertise, but can we drive it? Can I buy this as a gift for my dad or my boyfriend or my girlfriend?
So you stumbled across this pivot. Did it kind of immediately ping where you're like, hey, I'm onto something here?
No, it took a lot of people asking me to realize, holy crap, like there is something here. And so another friend of mine who exited, he like had a social beer drinking business. He exited his company to another social commerce company called Living Social. I don't know if you remember Living Social back in the day.
Yeah, I do.
Kind of like alumni as a Groupon. He exited to Living Social, and he's like, look, I'm selling for Living Social. And he asked me this one question, like after the event, because I met him at the event, was like, he said, hey, do you know any local exotic car rental companies in Boston? At that moment, I said, yeah, me. Right. So I did this whole switch, but I said, look, I don't do rentals. Right. I'll do experiences, because I know no one's going to drop like $2,000 or $3,000 per day for a rental. Right. So I said, I'll do 1 hour long experiences for people to drive a Ferrari 8 times, like for an 8-hour day. Right. So like I was trying to make the math work. He said, that's a great idea. Let's make it work. So we couldn't do something with Living Social because during that time in 2010, there wasn't enough like email marketing subscribers. But he said, go talk to Groupon. And that was the biggest competitor. And Groupon said, we love what you're doing. Give us 2 months when we'll have enough email subscribers. So Father's Day weekend 2010, I launched my first Ferrari 360 deal with Groupon. It was like $100. Launch Father's Day weekend 2010. We sold 3,000 in 2.5 days.
And how many cars? Did you just have the one car at this point?
I had no cars at this point. Right, I rented a car.
This is the most entrepreneurial thing ever. Which is like, I'll work out to figure this shit out afterwards. Yeah.
So I and when we sold that many, I was like, okay, cashing out my IBM 401k. I'm buying my first Ferrari because I had to fulfill 3,000 people, and and that was that's kind of where it all worked out. So like on paper, 3,000 people at $100, that's $300,000.
That's a lot of money.
They need their commissions, and I needed mine. I had to like get paid on redemption. So it was like a whole process of actually collecting the money. So I was like, I got to go fund my own Ferrari. And so I bought my first Ferrari And then we redeemed all the people that bought,
Incredible.
and worked out.
So I often ask my guests when we're doing this, the trajectory of the business piece, about reflecting back on, were there any killer plays or pivots or things that you did that really turned the fortunes of the business. And as you were talking there, I mean, I jotted down a couple that I certainly heard. One was, you were listening to your audience, right? You recognized, yeah, they might have to tell you several times, but the pattern in my mind, what I'm hearing from you is like, it's like pattern recognition. You kept on hearing the same thing and thought, I might be onto something, which sounds like a very key part of the success of what you ended up building, which was you just listened to the customer, right? You weren't just trying to put something down their throat that they weren't interested in. You were actually thinking, actually, they don't want A, they want B.
Listening was the number one most important thing of just going into the consumer business. And then as I got good at, executing, these, what I call these hour-long street drives, it wasn't as scalable, because if you thought about it, I was making like $100 an hour for 8-hour days, right? So, and then you had throw in lunch, you're only making $700 a day, right? And then, I just bought like $150,000 used Ferrari. The numbers weren't going to work. So talking to Groupon, who is now essentially my customer, right? So I'm a B2B2C. They said, I said, hey, what else do you want me to do that nobody else is willing to do, right? And they said, can we do something autocross wise? And when autocross came into mind, I was like, you know what? That's actually a great idea, because I just got into an accident on Boylston Street. So I parked a Ferrari on at the light of Tremont and Boylston, right?
That's a busy street. For people that have never been, that is a busy place to be. Yeah.
I had a truck who was coming, taking a left, and actually his tire with all the lug nuts put a hole in the Ferrari door. And so I was like, I got to stop doing stuff on the street because the liability and the risk was so high. So switch to autocross, which is literally empty parking lots. You make up your own course with safety cones, was a great safety idea, because all I care about is nobody getting hurt. But then what ended up happening was that people were able to go through their experience quicker, like in terms of logistics, and faster, meaning that they can go harder in the track. So what I used to do, like 1 hour, I would go through one person. When we switched to autocross, we're doing, like, with one Ferrari, I can get 5 people through an hour.
Where were they doing these on a track? When you say, again, for our listeners and viewers, like autocross, just define that for us as well, just so everyone understands what that means.
So autocross, think of a big mall parking lot, and we set up our own little mini safety course, road course with orange cones.
There's no other cars around, right? There's no other
cars.
Like in a safe environment. Yeah, okay. So you
very safe environment.
This space, and then you create a race track environment where these guys can have 20 minutes to right. Okay, what a cool idea, by the way.
Yeah. So my first market was Tampa, and that's where we started. We actually rented out the St. Pete College Allstate Center, which is that campus is known for public safety. So they train police officers, they train like ambulance and all that. So that was like a perfect place for us to stage this autocross experience, because they already had a course, and so going from street driving for one person making $100, with one same car, we can get 5 people per hour, right, for 8 hours. So that went from 5, people per hour times 8, that's 40 people. And so then at that point, we bought another car, because at the same lot, we can actually get 2 cars going at one time. So we just kept getting better with logistics. But the one thing that I didn't realize that I kind of now realize in the back end was that, people wanted to have fun. And so we really just made it like a very Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby type of environment where we were just like having so much fun shooting the shit. We weren't like trying to be like, we were driving Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Aston Martins, but we weren't trying to be a dealership, right? Like, if anything,
it was just all about fun.
It was all about fun. Like, most people don't know, when they go to the dealership, it's clean. When you go to a racetrack, it is dirty as fuck, right? There is tired, like brake dust, tires flapping all over the place. Like, most people, if you're in the hot Tampa sun, like, it's even worse because you're getting beat down by the sun, you're getting tan, it's all that stuff. So we were just kind of like, I was trying to bring out this whole Southern Ricky Bobby experience to all my clients and having a good time. So what does that mean? We were like giving hot laps to
Wow.
everybody's spouses, their kids, because we want this to be a very family oriented experience. And that, I didn't know this, but that did so well for us that we were actually voted as one of the, for this period of time, we were voted as by DuPont Registry Group, that magazine, as
Yeah.
the #1 motorsports experience in Tampa, Florida.
Wow. And it's interesting because going back to, I picked up on something you said before, which was you talked about the language you used rather than it being rentals. You talked about it being experiences, and then you took that concept. And it's funny because it's happened on a few other interviews we've done on Next, which is the positioning of the brand, the positioning of what it is in the mind of the customer, whether it's B2C or B2B, is so powerful. But you really lent into that in terms of making it a fun experience, which is so smart. And so when you started, the volumes coming through, presumably at some point you started buying more cars, and then like how many, by the time, that you transacted on this business, like how many cars were there, and what was the setup, and what was the time period as well? Like, give us a sense of how quick it all happened.
So I started in 2010. The first 2011, I'll say 2012 is when I started doing full autocross, right? I transitioned to full autocross, and then I had to go buy more cars. And the business closed down in like 2019, or right before the pandemic. So I say in our heyday, at like about 2015 or 2016, we were like 16 exotic cars, 5 trucks, 5 trailers. And the reason why you had 16 is that we've had accidents. I mean, we've been like Instagram famous. Good thing they don't know it's me, but we've had accidents where you see Ferrari hydroplaning into a Lamborghini, boom. And I can show that to you, but like, that is us. Like, it wasn't me, but it was one of our instructors, like hot dogging during lunch when he should have been. That's a whole nother legal issue that we won.
Oh,
Yeah. So we had redundancy with cars because you don't want to cancel events on anybody, right? Because people work so hard to drive a Ferrari or get there. We didn't want to cancel, right? So my one thing is like, we don't want to cancel. So I bought cars. And so we only used like 5 at a time. I start 10 at a time, but we had 6 extras in Portland, Oregon, and in Sarasota, Florida. All right, because they were so close enough that if something happened, we could have flown, and then grab the trailer and go. Right.
Wow.
So that was strategically, yeah. So like most people don't in AI or tech, you have to have backups, data backups. In my world, the only backups are cars. That is where you make your money. So at a point in time, before my exit, our highest was like 16 exotic cars, 5 trucks, 5 trailers. Yeah. And it was a lot managing that. We had a lot of employees. We had a lot of contractors that worked for us locally. And most of our contractors were people that came through our experiences and loved it. And they're like, can we work for you?
They loved the whole thing.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we'll be back. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they became some of like my closest friends. And I still get calls today about, hey, are you working again? Are you doing anything? And I'd love to come back and work for you.
Wow. And I know, we can't, due to confidentiality reasons, we can't go into too much detail about the exit in the transaction. But I suppose as you reflect back, you've told obviously the narrative of like what you learned. Like you strike me as being such an entrepreneurial person, and you mentioned your dad had a sushi business. I was going to ask about that. Was entrepreneurship just in the DNA? Like, you like, was that just always? I appreciate you were at IBM, but my guess is there was always an itch to scratch there to become entrepreneurial and build a fantastic and very cool business. By the way, this is a cool business. I imagine it wasn't difficult to make friends in this situation. But yeah, like I'd love you to, I suppose, was the entrepreneurial thing that was there, and then when the transaction happened as well. Again, I don't want to go into too much. We can't go into detail about that, but like, interesting to know then what the aftermath of that looked like and felt like what next? Like, you'd done this thing in an area that was passionate, you be able to flex your entrepreneurial muscles,
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, because then and not to be a spoiler, but you've now got another business in the same sector, so I want to get into that.
Yeah. So to touch upon my my entrepreneurism, I, in the back of my head, I think I confused entrepreneurialism with business ownership. When I was
Yeah.
at IBM, I said to myself, I never want to own my own business, right? Flat out. I flat out.
Because of what you saw with your family, if that makes sense.
I think it's because I didn't want that responsibility, and I didn't know. I was kind of scared because I was like, because my parents own a Chinese restaurant. I'm an immigrant from Taiwan. We own a Chinese restaurant. It was a lot of hard work. And that said, and I worked at the restaurant, right? I always think I think every child growing up should have a restaurant, should have a job in a restaurant. So they know.
I did 7 years as washing dishes and a waiter, so I could not agree. You learn so many things doing that. I agree.
Yeah. Hard work, being polite and all that. And so, so I didn't want that like business. I didn't want to own that business. So that's what I kind of equated with. And even at IBM, I was like, holy shit, like there is so much. There's layoffs. I would hate to lay somebody off and all that.
Sure.
And so at that point in time, I confused entrepreneurship with business ownership, right? And I was like, I didn't want to be a business owner. Hence, I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. But looking back, reflecting today, I was an entrepreneur, but I just didn't know how to even admit it because one of my first jobs was I was a DJ in Prague. I was 19. I literally go, there's so much drum and bass and techno, I can't handle it. And this is like 1998 when I went to Prague for school. I was this Asian kid, 6 feet tall.
Thought you couldn't get cooler. Just when I thought you couldn't get any cooler, man. Like
I was literally knocking like in Prague. The way my context is, there's just so much house music that I just missed hip hop and rap, and nobody was playing it in Prague. So I literally went and I was like, this is before the huge internet boom. Like there was these magazines called Downtown Prague, and told you all the nightlife stuff. And I went to every club and I knocked on their door and I said, hey, are you looking for a DJ that's American, that's got hip hop music? And they said, absolutely. And so I got gigs from 2 places, Cafe Paradiso, Chapeau Rouge in Prague, and last one is Rados FX, right? And so 3 places hired me. I was spending like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, different places. And I wasn't even a good DJ. I just had a shitload of MP3s that I plugged in the stereo system, and I had Winamp, and they queued it all up, and it was. If you're old 47, you know what Winamp it is. The advent of MP3s before Napster. That was where I started realizing that that's when I was an entrepreneur. Was that I just had a problem that I wanted to solve, which is I just wanted to listen to good hip hop and rap, and I want to bring my friends together.
Bring that
right.
That's cool. Interesting. That's such an interesting journey. And then so obviously you build up a business with 16 cars, including some contingency, a successful business that you're able to exit on. Talk us through then what the afterlife looked like from a transition perspective. I imagine that is a very fun. I actually logistically, I imagine it was a nightmare running a business like that. It looks very fun, but I imagine the reality of if anyone's listening and thinking, "Oh, I'm going to do that," I suspect you would be like, guys, it's not all for. I mean, there are Ferraris and Lamborghinis, but actually, the reality of, I imagine dealing with maintenance, insurance, the incidents. Oh God, I would you do that business again?
No.
No. Okay. Why? Like, tell us what.
So
what was it about running that business that was so painful?
When you're into generally heavy equipment, right? I'll throw in that with exotic car, even the cars, is that in today's day is that because my events were happening so fast, you have to number one, you have to overbuy an inventory so that you can't cancel. Like if something does go wrong, sometimes I remember one time I had a Lamborghini Gallardo. Something happened where the system just shut down, and I had to get a part from Italy because it was VIN number specific, and that took like 4 months sitting there, right? Like it's not a Honda, but it's a Lamborghini, so some things are VIN specific that have to be ordered. Plus, even worse today is there's a lack of labor and talent in the marketplace to go fix your exotic cars, right?
Yeah.
So you couple that today in today's environment, I was like, oh my, you may have a car, but you'll never be fixed. You're right, unless you're the guy that's going to overpay the repair guy X amount of money, right, out of luxury. But I'm a business and I have to look at my expenses, right? So so today I actually, a lot of the work or the cars that I get, I have some, but I also borrow for, like, think of commercial or like private flight brokers. They don't
Yeah.
own the vehicles. They get it from family offices just sitting there. I'm like the same way because I have enough relationships where people trust me. And depending on what we're doing with the cars, it could be like an activation where just the car's just looking pretty, no one's touching it. Versus if someone's doing heavy driving, I'm probably going to use my cars, but I'll buy different type of cars that have the same cachet but a lower budget that we're going to beat the crap out of, which is fine, right? So it's all different uses nowadays. But the heavy use is stuff that we started learning how to change our own tires. Like
Yeah.
at the autocross course because we couldn't go elsewhere, right? We had to learn, driver acts. There was an accident by another company where their staff was drag racing each other and they actually killed a motorcyclist on the way back from
Oh,
fueling
God.
up. When I heard that, I was like, all right, nobody's taking the cars off the track. We're getting fuel jugs, fueling up at the gas station, bringing it back. So I
Wow.
was logistically managing safety, right? Like that was the big issue of having these cars.
Man, that sounds like a nightmare, managing all that. And then, so talk to us about your journey post exit then, in terms of, I remember when we met in Miami, you were talking about you thought about doing so many different things, and then hilariously you end up back in the motor kind of exotic car trade again, but in a different form, which I want to come on to and talk about how you ended up doing what you do today.
Yeah.
But what else what was that like, right? So you'd obviously had this successful business, you transacted, you were then in a situation where you were like, okay, like, what do I do next? And your kids are similar age, presumably you had kids and all that kind of stuff. And so talk us through like how you were going through. Was it like loss of identity, or what to do next? Was it, my journey is slightly different, but I'd love you just to talk about what you were going through at that point.
Yeah. So through the exit process, I was gearing up for like my next chapter. What was that? At that point in time, there's two routes. One was real estate development up in Portland, Maine, because I have a small portfolio. And the other one was, I think I'm crazy, but Chick-fil-A.
Hey, listen, I love Chick-fil-A. That's not crazy.
So
why
I'll
Chick-fil-A then? So what? Yeah, I'd love you to dig into that, because that's a cool brand.
Yeah. So when we're doing autocrosses, we actually rented out the parking lot at Tyrone Square Mall in St. Pete, Florida. And being from the north, we don't have Chick-fil-A, right? So a lot of my guys are from the north, and we befriended the Chick-fil-A owner operator at the mall. And so he's like, what are you guys doing? Like, yeah, we got some Ferraris, Lamborghinis. If you want to come out and hang out, happy to take you out, or like at the end of the day, nothing on. If you want to go drive it, you're more than welcome to. Because I like Chick-fil-A people. Like, they're just like down the earth. They're not going to mess around, right? Like that's who they are. And so that guy, such a nice guy, he introduced me to his mentor, a guy named John, who lives in in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I lived, and he owns 2 Chick-fil-A's, but he's also part of the Chick-fil-A family and board. And one of the nicest guys I ever met. And I said, hey, I'm going to be in Raleigh doing this event, and he came out to the event, and we got to shake hands, talk for 20, 30 minutes, got to know each other, and getting to know him. He said, the most from an operator. At that point in time, there was some news about how Apple stores don't commission their sales staff enough, right? That is a huge thing. And I got to I remarked on that, and he goes, yeah, no, I totally understand. He goes, there's some times I wish that we did a better job as a company helping our part-time employees get healthcare benefits. And I'm like, and I was like, wow, that's a very, very nice thing to say. And then as I got to know him, the guy's adopted, kids from Africa. He's very, he was very, to me, as I got to meet the guy, and I didn't know him from a hole in the wall, I just knew he was a car enthusiast, but he just struck me as somebody I wanted to be around. Just like the guy,
quite inspiring.
Yeah, just like the guy that owned the the Chick-fil-A in St. Pete. Like, I just like to be around the guy. Like, he was just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I didn't know about it. I just gravitated towards him and those types of people. That's why, like, I trust Chick-fil-A people, like without a doubt. It's kind of like PEF. You're in PEF, you kind of trust them. And so I said, hey, like, out of curiosity, like, what's it like to own your own Chick-fil-A or run your own Chick-fil-A? And he kind of gave me the ins and outs, and he's like, look, it's like a annual revenue at that point in time was like $4 million, $4 million. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. He goes, yeah, I mean, if like, based on what I see here, like, I think you should consider it. Like, I don't choose anybody, but, I'm always happy to tell, his point of view, but he's like, I'm not part of the selection committee. And so during the process of my exit, I applied and I went through the process. I went to the whole, all the interviews, and I got invited to Atlanta, like to Chick-fil-A headquarters.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the guy who, I remember his name, Tyler, nice guy. He said to me, and everybody there was nice. He said to me, or I forgot who said this to me. I think it was him. He goes, congratulations on getting invited to the Chick-fil-A headquarters for owner-operator interview. They said less people have walked through these doors than making an NBA basketball team.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like,
Hence the demand for it. And I hope they had a good spread on at lunchtime there. I'm hoping that was.
And so I was like really excited. And as I go, like in headquarters, Truett Cathy, the founder, he had a collection of vehicles like right downstairs. And it was a great experience. Like, I went through the interview process. They want to make sure like you are committed, you're like family, and you're entrepreneurial enough for them. But I also think not entrepreneurial enough from like a business perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you got to follow processes. And I think in the franchise world, the creativity comes in managing your people. Everything else is figured out. I think it's the leadership skills. And so at the end of it, like, I wasn't selected, which was totally fine. I think for me personally, it's like, how do they size up a guy that's owned 16 exotic cars and at that time probably like 30 years old, or 39 years old? Like, is he going to stay long-term at a Chick-fil-A? Will he or will he not? I think at that point in time, hell yeah, I would have. Right. But he didn't. And so, things have a weird way of working out. So then I transitioned to real estate. I was building some, residential places, condo conversions, but then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, and in real estate development, you want to go as fast as you can because it's a race, a time of inflationary pricing of all the products, just the cost, right? That's urban real estate. And so when the pandemic hit, everything stopped, right? We didn't know who was working, who wasn't working, what the prices were. You heard about all the price increases. So literally, I had nothing to do.
Were you bored? Like, I mean, it's funny. Like, I was actually in Boston during the pandemic, but I had so much going on. Our business was growing really quickly. I wrote my first book, and it was a very busy time. But I remember speaking to a few people that got very, very quite bored and lonely. And for some people, that can lead to some terrible habits, whether it's drinking or drugs or whatever, or it can lead to some real creativity and kind of aha moments. So, like, where were you on that kind of spectrum?
I think I was all over there. I think I was because I didn't have anything to do. I ended up just like watching master classes, learn how to play tennis by Serena Williams against a tennis wall by myself. You know what I mean? Or I would be at the track just running track laps by myself.
Yeah.
I would hang out with my girlfriend and stuff like that, which is cool. But she was working. But so I realized, like, I'm in a different situation. She has a corporate job and I'm an entrepreneur. And so I was like, I got to get out. And so I did what I can outside and to learn. But it wasn't until like I was like, look, everyone was just talking about this whole thing of like the pandemic is eventually going to end. And so they asked, like, where would you go? Because that's the revenge travel, right? Where people have all this money saved up from like pandemic money. And so I was like, look, with all my work in motorsports, I was like, I'm going to plan my first trip. and it's going to go back to Italy where I'm going to do, I did my Ferrari owners factory tour, Lamborghini and Pagani. So I actually planned a trip around going to Italy to go to Motor Valley to just go back to the same places that I fell in love with, which
So
is
interesting.
Ferrari.
So you almost wanted in your mind, this revenge travel concept. You wanted to almost reconnect with that kind of automotive mothership, but more specifically the kind of super premium brands in Ferrari and Lamborghini,
Yeah.
etc.
I missed the Ferrari life, right? And so I wanted to go back and enjoy it, enjoy the food. And so I was like, so I created a trip, like a seven night trip. And I said, you know what? Let me see if any of my old customers wanted to come. And I did an email blast, and 16 people said, I'd love to go with you to Italy. Right. And so I was like, oh shit, like this is kind of cool. And so we went, we had a blast. And there are people from all over, from North Carolina, from Texas, from Savannah, from California. And the following year, they're like, hey, can we do Germany and go visit Porsche, Audi, Mercedes, BMW? And I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And so we did that. And then that was like year 2, year 3.
So did you already know this was a new, because obviously this is kind of the genesis of your new business, right? And what are some of the things you do now? And what, like, did you realize at the time that was, because they're like, hey, this is fun, I'll help arrange this. Or did you say, actually, I might be onto something here, and this is a pivot into, my guess is a higher value, higher ticket. If I'm spending $100 to do a Ferrari around a kind of a lot for a couple, like 20 minutes, that's very different to going to
like
Porsche.
10,000. Yeah, like you're dropping about 10,000 for a trip, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
10,000.
Did you know it was a business? Did you know it was a business like quickly?
Nope. For me, I tried to. This is kind of the strange part, is that I think once things become a business, that's when the fun gets taken out of it, right? I think for me, I look at this as my Encore job, where it's like,
I love that.
My finances are met. Whatever I do here, it's a little extra gravy that if I want to go buy my kids some more sporting equipment, take them on a luxury trip, I could do that, right? And so it was my Encore job because I missed it. I loved it. And I didn't know like what to charge or not to charge. I was like, hey, I just want good people to show up, and usually good people have more money, and I get to pick the restaurants, which is like my favorite thing to do,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
And they're all Michelin rated, so I got to have people that have time in mind that want to go eat Michelin rated meals. And so that's kind of how this whole genesis started with these trips. And then where things got really like interesting was Aston Martin Formula One came on the scene when Lance Stroll bought over Aston Martin Lagonda and Racing Point India in the F1 Series League, and then obviously Drive to Survive came out. I had a contact, a guy named Shergul, super nice guy. I met him at an event, at a British Council event sponsored by the British Council in Boston at MIT. And I've heard of Shergul in the past through some of my angel networks and stuff. And Shergul and I connected very well. I learned that he lived in my hometown of Lexington. And we met for coffee in Lexington. And what ended up happening was I was like, dude, you're an American. How are you working for this British company? And he goes, well, and he was giving me his backstory. And he moved back to take on this role of a head of Aston Martin Formula One North America. And I was like, how do I get a job with you? What is it? He goes like, there's really no jobs here unless you're, selling sponsorships. Everything's back in the UK. I gave my background. It's kind of like what I'm doing with you. And I was like, yeah, I do these luxury trips. And I think in the back of his brain, he was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like from a sales sponsorship perspective, how can we make some things work? And so we didn't really have anything to talk about. It was more of like, let's get to know each other. Because I think he was looking for leads as well too, and through just our PEF network, maybe there's something here. And as I got to know him more, he knew a lot of the same of my friends in my venture groups, in my investment groups. But the really funny thing was that as I got to know him and we follow each other on Instagram and Facebook, is that I grew up playing basketball with his dad when I was in high school. Look at that.
Wow.
That was the funny thing. And I think maybe 6 months later, Shergul, he brought me in to work with one of his sponsors, Regent Cruise Lines. And Regent, they're a luxury cruise line
Yeah.
company. And they actually had a sponsorship where they're actually going to do a themed cruise with Aston Martin Formula One. They're going to bring in simulators, pretty much a replica, AM 25, or the car that last year, Merrick Reichman, the designer of Aston Martin, like on the cruise.
On the
And the
cruise.
one
Okay,
thing
okay.
that they didn't have was motorsports experiences pre-cruise, during the cruise, and post-cruise. So pre-cruise in Barcelona, during the cruise in Monaco, and post-cruise in Bologna. So Shergool brought me in to work with Regent to develop those 3 experiences last year, and I did that for them.
Wow.
And we did, like, it was such an amazing time. Like, I took people to, like, Italy is always my favorite.
Yeah.
There we did the full
It's the
thing. We
greatest.
did a track experience in Italy. I did a surprise visit to Aston Martin Bologna, Francesca Stefanelli, such an amazing Aston Martin, dealership owner. She brings that Italian pride to everything that they do, and they're doing this in the heart of Ferrari and Lamborghini and Pagani,
Yeah,
right?
it's gonna be a brave move.
Right. And in Monaco, these were all, like, Monaco, we lived like the life of an F1 driver, where we had classic cars chauffeur us around. We did helicopter experience. We drove the F1 street track in exotic cars. We dined at Cafe de Paris in Monaco Square. And in Bologna, I always like the surprise and delight. What wasn't on our itinerary was, I took everybody to the Ferrari Challenge race, because they got in a
Wow.
day early, and they're like, "What is this thing?" They're like, it's a race I go to." And we had full Ferrari hospitality, and they were like so surprised. Like,
Yeah.
we were walking the pit lanes, the weather tech, sexy girls were there. They're all former Playboy Playmates and Maxim cover girls. And
Everyone's
and
happy.
everyone's happy, and
Yeah.
I take them to these, like, we were driving Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Aston Martins, throughout Spain. I rented an airplane where we got an aerial view of the F1 racetrack. I did a
Wow.
private tour of a collector's collection, and
And is
Dave,
this what the business does now? So has it become a business in the you were reluctant to take this hobby into business, but everything you're saying, man, it sounds like you have learned the good and the bad from business. Number one, it's interesting. Like, I'm listening to you. You've retained the experiences, right? You've retained the fun. You've added this element of surprise and delight, which I love this concept around customer experience. It's like, you've already promised them a lot, but there's a little bit of kind of a cherry on the cake there that you bring to your experiences. And so arranging these amazing car related like kind of trips, events. And I know you did the Aston Martin one recently in Austria. Is that the business now? Like, that seems like what you do day to day, which seems kind of like tie and passion and joy, and you having spent time with you, like, a bit like me, in the sense that, like, you like being around other people and just kind of shooting the shit and getting to know people. Like, it seems to be bringing a lot of the bits of your life that you really value together. And maybe I'm reading into it too much, but like, that's what I get from this conversation.
it is a business now, but it's also a business that I get to dictate, like, what I want to do. So a lot of the trips that I do, it's trips that I want to go on, and I'm looking for friends that want to go on it with me.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of like these trips. I also have this other side where I work with brands, like, Regent's a brand. Like, there's maybe other tech brands where they want me to do, like, a biz dev experience, like a multi-day journey throughout, like, the Blue Ridge Parkway, et cetera, et cetera. And I do it if they have a trip that they want executed, I'll do it. I'll be the execution partner. Like, they may have an agency. They go, "Hey, we want to do this, but we don't know anybody that does it. So let's call Ray because he could do it. He's got cars. He has cars." Or if they don't, I'll throw in my ideas because they're fun. Like we talked about Ricky Bobby. I have this American Muscle Ricky Bobby tour where I hire a Ricky Bobby impersonator to go hang out with us. Right? Like, that's the stuff that I'll make up because it's fun for me. And I
Yeah.
know, and I think if it's fun for me, it's going to be fun for you guys, because I'm a business owner that exited a business in the past that understands the mechanics behind how business is done.
Are they typically all PF type people who have exited businesses or have got good business? Are they entrepreneurs on the whole that you're dealing with? Or presumably they are, if you're paying 10 grand to go on a trip to drive some cars, these are high net worth individuals who've got good jobs, etc.
Yeah. Short answer is yes. They've done well in their career. Most of them are business owners. Some they're not. They have high titles. They have high paying jobs. I think for the brands or companies, they're all employees, but they're all C-level folks who understand what needs to get done from like a revenue perspective or a relationship perspective. But I think it's people that appreciate motorsports as that first touch point that gets people in. Because when I work with brands, like I try to find brands that already have a Formula One sponsorship or are looking into it, because I know that there's a connection point. If they're not even looking into that, then there's no point. And using research like Harvard Business Review, Deloitte, Stanford, MIT, like, sponsorship is great for Formula One, but it's what I can do beyond the racetrack, because the racing at an F1 race is a certain point in time, 3 days, but you want to keep that experience going afterwards. And when you're in a race, it's kind of like you're so busy talking to everybody, like you can't do as much. So it's like, how do we do that, but in a more intimate setting? That's where I come in to do these multi-day trips, whether it's in the US or around the world, to help, I would say, confirm that relationship that they met or they started at the F1 track, right?
Yeah. Well, Ray, look, you and I can talk all day because it's just so fun. But like, I think you have been, it's just reflecting on the conversation today. You've given so much, I think, to other founders and entrepreneurs scaling their businesses, and in terms of some of the lessons that you've had, particularly in your first business, and what made that a success, but also like the behind the scenes and how tough that, which I think is great. Like, I think a lot of people think, especially cool businesses, look great from the outside. Running a restaurant looks fantastic for the outside. When you worked in one, and it's very hard to make money consistently well. And so I think you painted an amazing picture of some of the things you learned on that journey. But I really admire this kind of post-exit life you've got, where you were kind enough to share like the boredom, right? And they're like, I tried this and I tried that, and the things that didn't work, but you kind of have found your way to something that seems like you dictate what you want to do, but you've turned it into a business. It brings you joy. It gets you around the people you want to do. You get to go to the nice countries or restaurants or whatever, which, is fantastic for you. So yeah, man, what an awesome, I knew you'd be good, but like, it was, you just bring such energy and enthusiasm, and we hit it off when we met. And so I'm so grateful that you made the time to come on NexChapter podcast. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great. I appreciate it, man. This is awesome. It's good seeing you as well too, buddy.
Thank you.